of nullification. Many of your mainstream media hosts like Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh, they're not even talking about this idea. And the reason is clear. I mean, those of us who understand how the media works is they're both, the right and the left, are both interested in centralizing federal power.
Absolutely.
That's all they really care about. And so when they see something like states' rights and the 10th Amendment and nullification as a way to sort of undermine that centralization of federal power because they just want to pursue their own centralization agenda, whether it's on the right, it's the military and the police state, whether it's on the left, it's the welfare state. The bottom line is those media talking heads don't want average people like you and me who are really looking for solutions out there to start thinking, well, wait a minute, maybe begging federal bureaucrats to give us our rights back, maybe that's a flawed strategy.
Sure, sure. And I notice how they compare you to like right-wing extremism.
Sure.
And, you know, of course, INFOWARS, now we're right-wing extremists. We used to be left-wing extremists when Bush was in office, but now that Obama's in office, we're right-wing extremists. Now, how often do you get that comparison a lot? Do they lump you in that category as well?
Well, absolutely. And, you know, you've got the usual suspects, the Southern Poverty Law Center. I'm happy to say that I've been mentioned in a few of their hate watch articles, which I always think is actually a badge of honor because of how wrong they are on what they're talking about. And what a lot of times they fail to mention are, you know, it's our right-wing propaganda, our hate propaganda, but we support marijuana nullification in California, which is typically not a right-wing issue. And so it crosses both ways. And what these organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center and the left-wing media, what they're really just trying to do is they're trying to make sure that this debate and this argument doesn't go outside the acceptable bounds of discussion in a free society.
Well, and notice how they never use extremism to describe the federal government.
Right,
like
absolutely.
there's nothing extreme about the TSA going down our pants. There's nothing extreme about the National Defense Authorization Act, the Patriot Act. No, we're the extremists.
Right, because what we want to do is we want to say, hey, listen, when the founders put the Constitution together, they put the 9th and the 10th Amendment in there as sort of these guardrails to make sure that things didn't go off track. And we're the extremists because we say, listen, the 9th and 10th Amendment have never been repealed. We still believe that the federal government should obey the employee handbook as it was ratified. And, you know, so that's an extreme position. I guess we're just going to have to not apologize for that.
Well, what happened to the 10th Amendment? I mean, how did we become a nation of collective amnesia and kind of forget about it? It seems like, you know, like I said, I was a little embarrassed about how much I didn't know. How come we don't know about this?
Well, you know, I think it's just been that it's the government school system that doesn't even really teach the Constitution anymore. In fact, if you're a constitutional lawyer, all you study really is case law. You don't really even study the Constitution, the founding documents, what happened at the state ratifying conventions, the discussions that were had at that point in time between, you know, people of differing opinions, between Patrick Henry and Alexander Hamilton. And you know, the idea that all it really takes, I mean, when I read the Constitution for the first time during the Bush administration and the Declaration of Independence, it struck me as I was reading the Declaration of Independence and I said, you know what? Many of these charges that were being levied against King George could be levied against President George.
Absolutely.
How far have we come? Yeah. And so I really think once people get their hands on those founding documents, once people start down the path, they become self-educators, they can get rid of the brainwashing they had or what they've heard about nullification or states' rights, how all we want to do is oppress minorities or bring back slavery. They start to understand that that is a false narrative. It starts to unravel in their minds, and we win over the hearts of the American people.
Sure, and nullification was used to fight slavery, you know. I mean, tell us some of the success stories of nullification in the past.
Well, you know, the term nullification really first was brought on the scene with James Madison and Thomas Jefferson during the Alien and Sedition Acts under President John Adams' administration. And what President John Adams did in 1798 was he basically outlawed free speech. He said it's no longer acceptable to criticize the federal government at all. And so Jefferson and Madison said, look, if we can't criticize the incumbents, we'll never have free elections in this nation again. And so what they did was they penned something called the Virginia and Kentucky Resolutions of 1798. What these documents said was it said, listen, the states are the final check on federal power. If the Supreme Court, if Congress, if the president, if they all conspire against the American people and conspire against the Constitution, what's the last resort? Well, the last resort is the states saying these things are unconstitutional. And so to defend against free speech, in 1798, nullification was introduced. And then during the Fugitive Slave Act in the 1850s, there's a case of the state of Wisconsin refusing to allow southern states to come back and kidnap runaway slaves and bring them back to the South. The Fugitive Slave Act made it a law that said you had to allow them to do that. You had to assist the federal government in doing that. And so rather than nullification being used to support slavery, it was used to undermine slavery by abolitionist states who said, look, the federal government is flat wrong on the issue of slavery, and we're not going to allow them to kidnap runaway slaves and take them back into bondage. We don't think it's right. It's not morally correct. We're going to stand up against that. And you see that happening time and time again.
And how does the mainstream media get that wrong? I mean, come on. I mean, you know.
It's hard to accidentally get it wrong.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, what about some current examples of nullification that are being used in present-day America?
Well, I mean, we've seen over the past 15 years anyway, we've seen states stand up against the drug war, which is an unconstitutional piece of legislation. I mean, if the federal government wants to legislate marijuana, they probably need to do it by passing a constitutional amendment like they did with alcohol in the 20s.
Sure.
They haven't done that, so it's an illegal usurpation of states' rights to regulate marijuana. California and 14 other states, I believe, have medical marijuana laws, even though the Supreme Court ruled in 2005 that the federal government can go in there and regulate the growth of 6 plants in your backyard for your own consumption under the Commerce Clause. Those states have not repealed those laws. They've said, you know what, you're just going to have to come and take the marijuana, I guess. And they have. Federal government, even under the Obama administration, has continued to commit the raids on all of these dispensaries.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. We've had the reports here on INFOWARS.com. They just ignore state rights and just go in there and do it anyway.
Absolutely. And we've seen successes with Real ID. The federal government tried to push through a national ID card.
Yeah, didn't half the states kind of say no to that? I mean, it was like 25.
The federal government keeps pushing the timeline back of compliance, and that's essentially dead. We've got states that have passed Firearms Freedom Acts that said, look, guns manufactured in our states and sold in our states, they are not subject to federal gun laws, period. And what we're seeing now is a real resurgence when it comes to the health care issue and National Defense Authorization Act.
Sure. And are those what you're going to focus on 2013? You think that's what we're going to focus on?
Well, and something to keep in mind is if you want to find out what's going on across the country regarding legislation, 10thamendmentcenter.com has a legislative tracking tab where you can see what states are doing what's passed, what hasn't. And what we find is the 10th Amendment Center doesn't really direct anything from on high. States bring these issues up. They happen at a grassroots level. They start going through the legislature, and this 10th Amendment Center sort of facilitates other states knowing what's going on. So what we're seeing bubbling up is in light of the Supreme Court ruling on Obamacare, states are still saying, you know what, we're going to introduce legislation that says federal agents who try to enforce the individual mandate here in our state, Oklahoma's one that's planning to do it, I believe New Jersey, those federal agents will face criminal action.
Yeah, that's what needs to happen. That's good news.
Absolutely. Yeah. The same thing with NDAA. You know, the National Defense Authorization Act, the 10th Amendment Center has a piece of legislation called the Liberty Preservation Act, which, again, is states that are going to say, we will not allow federal agents to come in here and to take away the Fourth Amendment rights of our citizens of our state. And, you know, many states are not in their legislative session right now. That's going to happen again in January and February. But we're already hearing the chatter. We're already seeing things happening to prepare for this. And what I want to encourage people to do is now is the time to educate yourself, your liberty grassroots-oriented group, your state reps and senators on the issue of nullification, not once the legislative session hits, but to get these people educated on it. So go to InfoWars store right now, buy yourself a copy, buy several copies to hand out to your state rep and state legislator, to your neighbor, so we can get this idea that the states don't have to sit back and take it. We can do something. It's a constitutional remedy that's always been available to us, and it really just takes the education and the willpower, I think, to sort of press forward on this.
Well, well said. So, yeah, definitely a good idea to pass this out to family and friends. And what about, is there a website that they can get involved in the 10th Amendment Centers at 10thamendmentcenter.com?
Yeah, 10thamendmentcenter.com is really that's the tip of the spear of this. And this is really something that is starting to gain a lot of momentum. We saw it all through 2010, 2011, and the beginning of 2012 when we were doing the Nullify Now tour across the country. People are hungry for this information. People are looking for solutions, and most people will recognize that no matter if it's Barack Obama or Mitt Romney, in 2013, government's going to grow, and the federal government's not going to listen to the people. We've got to decentralize power and bring it back to the states.
Well, the federal government's not going to limit itself,
no.
You know, and the federal courts are only going to rubber stamp whatever's handed down to them by the federal government. So it's up to us, we the people, to nullify every unconstitutional decision by the federal government and by utilizing the power of the 10th Amendment.
That's right.
Well, Jason, it was great to have you with us today, man.
Anytime.
I hope to come back in the near future, and let's do it again.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's right. The Constitution of the United States is a set of rules for us to govern the government. It's not the other way around. The government is not your boss. So, hey, once again, nullification, the rightful remedy, it is available right now at INFOWARSshop.com. I highly recommend this to all patriots. Be sure to check it out. Pass this information along to your friends, your family, coworkers, neighbors, etc., and get them involved in the 10th Amendment movement. Hey, that's going to do it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Darren McBreen. The INFOWARS Nightly News will return, Lord willing, next Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock p.m. Central Time. Until then, I hope you all have a blessed weekend, and we'll see you back right here on Monday. Good night.